So again, it's the use of a literal truth that's basically designed to pitch a message that's grossly misleading. So let's ask about this group, the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. Who funds a group that would say something like that? Again, the Donors Capital Fund that funded the first organization I discussed, as well as the Chase Foundation of Virginia and the Roe Foundation, which support a list of conservative causes. If you call an organization the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, it sounds kind of neutral and, again, kind of, well, probably trying to do good thing. But if you go back and look at who's funding it, and you find that the funding sources, again, are heavily linked to energy industry, groups like ExxonMobil, then you understand that they're not quite as impartial as their name would suggest. Now, here's another quote from a group called the CO2 Coalition. Quote, "Concerns about carbon dioxide being a quote-unquote pollutant are not valid. Climate change is proceeding very slowly, and the likely increase in temperature for the 21st century is about 1 degree Celsius or less." Close quote. Well, yes. Is that technically true? The temperature of the Earth has increased by about 1 degree since industrialization, and 197 countries just signed an agreement in Paris last year to try to limit any further increase to no more than 1 degree additional. And so this group makes it sound like 1 degree, who cares about 1 degree? Well, 100-degree fever is only 2 degrees more than normal, but it's enough to make you pretty sick. It's actually 1.4 degrees more than normal. It's enough to make you pretty sick. The number of 0.08 sounds tiny in the abstract, but if that's your blood alcohol content, that gets you a DUI in Virginia. The number sounds small. Oh gosh, why would that make a difference? That gets you a DUI because you're impaired. So yes, the group using the 1 degree in temperature makes it sound like it's not that big a deal, but it is that big a deal. Now, here's the last one I want to say, Madam President, before I close. This is kind of a doozy because it's from an open letter to Pope Francis on the topic of the Pope's environmental encyclical. And the group is called the Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation. Nothing like going big if you're going to pick a name for yourself. I'm glad there's somebody who's trying to be a steward of creation. Their quote starts with a quote from the 19th Psalm. Quote, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament proclaims his handiwork." Beautiful aspect, the first verse in the 19th Psalm. But then the group goes on to declare in their own words, "By using fossil fuels to generate energy to lift billions of God's children, precious children, out of poverty, we liberate from the tomb of earth the carbon dioxide on which plants and therefore all the rest of life depend. In light of these considerations, we believe it is both unwise and unjust to adopt policies requiring reduced use of fossil fuels for energy." So somebody is really using Scripture to argue that making our energy production cleaner, safer, cheaper violates the Christian tenet of caring for the poor? I mean, I'm a Christian, and many of us in this body have a deep faith background in one faith or another, but I'll use a non-Christian phrase to describe that argument. It takes a lot of chutzpah to claim your religious faith and compassion for the poor drives you to support pollution-intensive energy, especially when the organization refuses to reveal how it is funded. In closing, Madam President, we certainly don't want to imply that all groups that, have an agenda or have a point of view are motivated by funding sources. But the web of denial that the senator from Rhode Island is asking us to come out and talk about tonight is one that includes a number of organizations that are climate deniers. And they are denying science that they actually, in my view, know to be true. There comes a point when the truth becomes so hard to deny that those who deny it are simply not credible. And you have to ask the question then, are you denying it? I assert that most of these organizations understand the science, and they accept the science, and they realize it to be true. So why do they deny the science? And the answer is greed. That's the basic answer. Many of the organizations that we're discussing are funded primarily by fossil fuel interests, and if they can delay even by a year, or 2 years, or 5 years, or even 6 months, the enactment of policies that would move us toward fewer fossil fuels, it will hurt their bottom line. So rather than come up here and argue about what the right transition should be, they're handing funds over to organizations that are trying to confuse the American public about science itself. So let me close and read from Pope Francis's encyclical, since the Cornwall Institute on the Stewardship of Creation cherry-picked a piece, and I'm going to read a quote. quote. Is it realistic to hope that those who are obsessed with maximizing profits will stop to reflect on the environmental damage which they will leave behind for future generations? Where profits alone count, there can be no thinking about the rhythms of nature, its phases of decay and regeneration, or the complexity of ecosystems which may be gravely upset by human intervention. Once we start to think about the kind of world we are leaving to future generations, we look at things differently. Future generations. We look at things differently. We realize that the world is a gift which we have freely received and we must share with others. Since the world has been given to us, we can no longer view reality in a purely utilitarian way in which efficiency and productivity are entirely geared to our individual benefit. Intergenerational solidarity is not optional, but rather a basic question of justice, since the world we have received also belongs to those who will follow us. Science and faith have a number of things in common, but one of the most important things they have in common is their first duty has to be to the truth. I hope all actors in the political process, whatever their views, will remember that and have that same commitment. Thank you, Madam President. With that, I yield the floor.
Madam President.